Have you ever wondered why your mind constantly categorizes and labels everything around you? From defining people by their roles to classifying experiences as good or bad, our mental categories shape how we see the world. But what if these very categories limit our understanding, trapping us in a cycle of predictable thinking and shallow perception? Imagine looking at life without labels, where each moment unfolds in its full richness, untouched by preconceived judgments. This is what Zen and Buddhist teachings invite us to explore, a world beyond rigid mental constructs. These traditions tell us that true wisdom isn't about accumulating more knowledge, but about peeling away the layers of these mental filters that cloud our view. In this video, we'll guide you through the process of understanding and transcending these mental categories, exploring why our minds cling to them, and how embracing a more fluid way of thinking can lead to a profound sense of freedom. Let's uncover how Zen's emphasis on emptiness and Buddhism's insight into impermanence can teach us to live more openly and connectedly. Are you ready to step beyond the comfort of labels and into a space of true clarity? Let's begin this journey to discover the art of seeing without boundaries. Why do our minds rely so heavily on categorizing everything we encounter? From childhood, we're taught to label and compartmentalize: this is a chair, that is a tree, this is right, and that is wrong. These mental categories become second nature, shaping the framework through which we understand and navigate the world. While this habit streamlines our experiences and helps us make sense of complexities, it also limits how deeply we perceive reality, often without us even noticing. Let's first explore why this process of categorization exists. From an evolutionary standpoint, our brain's need to sort information is rooted in survival. Early humans needed to quickly identify what was safe and what posed a threat. So labeling became an efficient cognitive tool. This habit allowed for faster decision-making and reduced the mental energy required to process new situations. However, these same shortcuts that ensured survival in the past now often lead us to make hasty judgments, fall into cognitive biases, and cling to rigid beliefs that may no longer serve us. One prominent issue is how we view the world through the lens of dualities: good versus bad, success versus failure, us versus them. These binary oppositions simplify our understanding but at the cost of distorting the subtleties of existence. Zen teachings challenge these fixed categories, presenting the idea that dualities are illusions, mere constructs of the mind. Huangbo Ziyun, a renowned Zen master, once pointed out, "The foolish reject what they see, not what they think, the wise reject what they think, not what they see." This statement invites us to question the automatic labels we impose and to consider the possibility of seeing beyond them. Our reliance on categories extends beyond physical objects and events; it shapes our identity, relationships, and emotional responses. When you encounter a setback, how quickly do you label it as negative? This instant judgment can trigger stress, anxiety, or even a defensive response. But what if, instead of labeling that experience as bad, you could observe it without judgment? This ability to pause and withhold categorization is at the heart of many Zen practices. By learning to witness an experience before assigning it a label, we can begin to detach from the restrictive power of these mental constructs. The Zen practice of meditation serves as a key tool in cultivating this awareness. Unlike traditional problem-solving approaches that aim to categorize and dissect, Zen meditation encourages a state of mindful observation. By sitting in stillness and focusing on the present moment, practitioners learn to watch their thoughts arise and dissipate without clinging to them. In this space, categories start to blur, and experiences are seen more as fluid movements rather than fixed points. The practice isn't about suppressing thoughts but about recognizing that they are transient, and do not define reality. Consider the use of koans in Zen tradition, those seemingly absurd questions or statements like "what is the sound of one hand clapping?" Koans serve a specific purpose: they disrupt habitual thought patterns. When the mind tries to categorize a cone within its existing structures and fails, it's forced into a state of openness. This helps practitioners step beyond logical thinking and into a space where labels cease to dominate perception. From a Buddhist perspective, understanding impermanence, anicca, further dismantles our reliance on mental categories. Impermanence teaches that everything, from the largest mountain to the smallest thought, is in a constant state of change. If nothing stays the same, then any category we assign is, by nature, temporary and flawed. Recognizing this invites a shift in how we perceive events and ideas. Instead of attaching to fixed notions, like labeling an experience as a permanent failure or success, we start to see life as a continuous flow, where every label is fleeting and ultimately inadequate to capture the whole picture. The implications of moving beyond mental categories are profound. When you practice seeing things without labels, your relationships transform. Imagine a conversation where you resist the urge to label the other person's words as right or wrong, and instead, simply listen. This simple shift invites more understanding and openness, reducing conflicts and creating genuine connections. Similarly, applying this approach to self-perception can lead to a deeper sense of peace. How often do we categorize ourselves? I'm smart. I'm not creative. I'm anxious, and let these labels dictate our choices and actions. Zen and Buddhist practices encourage recognizing these identities as constructs. You are not confined to the labels your mind imposes, you are the awareness observing them. This realization opens the door to living a life that isn't boxed in by self-imposed definitions. Breaking free from these mental constructs isn't without challenges. It's natural to feel disoriented when the foundation of your thought process is questioned. You may find yourself resisting or slipping back into old patterns. However, this is where consistent practice comes in. Techniques such as shikantaza, just sitting, or mindfulness exercises that focus on observing without judgment are tools to strengthen this new way of thinking. With time, they become pathways to seeing the world in a truer light, unfiltered by preconceptions. As we continue through this exploration, we will dive deeper into Zen's teachings on emptiness, and how they support the journey of transcending categories. These teachings will illuminate practical steps that make this transformative shift achievable, helping us all to reconnect with a more authentic experience of life. In the heart of Zen lies the profound teaching of shunyata, or emptiness. This concept can be challenging at first, as it isn't about literal emptiness or a void, but rather the recognition that all things are interconnected and lack an inherent, fixed identity. Emptiness is the ultimate rejection of mental categories, urging us to see beyond labels and concepts to experience reality as it is. Zen masters often use simple yet striking stories to illustrate this idea. One such story involves a student asking a master, "What is the essence of Zen?" The master replies, "When I am hungry, I eat, when I am tired, I sleep." On the surface, this answer seems simplistic. However, it highlights the core of Zen practice, living fully in the moment without the interference of mental constructs. Eating is not labeled as good or bad, nor is sleep seen as necessary or unproductive, they just are. Why is this significant? Because as humans, we are conditioned to project meaning onto everything. We analyze, dissect, and categorize to make sense of our experiences. This helps in daily functioning, but also distances us from the direct experience of living. Zen teachings remind us that true insight comes from the space beyond these projections. Emptiness doesn't mean that things don't exist, it means that their essence is not defined by rigid boundaries. For instance, consider a tree. We might label it as a tree, but it is also a collection of elements, roots connected to the earth, leaves drawing in sunlight, water coursing through its structure, and air sustaining its growth. The tree is not separate, it is in a dance with everything around it. Similarly, our thoughts and emotions are not isolated but arise due to countless influences and interactions. Zen calls us to step into this awareness, where the duality of subject and object blurs. This leads us to non-duality, the state where distinctions between me and the world dissolve. Non-duality is experienced when we drop the mental habit of categorizing our surroundings and ourselves as separate entities. Imagine moments where you've felt completely absorbed in an activity, whether watching a sunset, playing music, or deep in meditation. In those moments, there was no internal dialogue labeling the experience, there was just being. A powerful Zen practice that embodies this principle is Zazen or seated meditation. When sitting in Zazen, practitioners are encouraged to observe their thoughts as they arise and pass, without clinging to or categorizing them. This practice gradually reveals the transient nature of thoughts, showing that they are like clouds moving across the sky, with the mind as the vast, open space behind them. The more one sits in this practice, the more apparent it becomes that thoughts, judgments, and mental categories are constructs, temporary and non-defining. The teaching of emptiness also aligns with the Buddhist concept of anatta, or non-self. This doctrine states that there is no unchanging, independent self within us. Just as the tree is made up of various interconnected parts, so are we, a flow of thoughts, experiences, sensations and consciousness, constantly changing. Embracing this understanding can be both liberating and disconcerting. It challenges the ego's insistence on a stable identity and pushes us to confront the reality that the labels we use to define ourselves are not as solid as they seem. The famous Zen master Thich Nhat Hanh often spoke about interbeing, a concept closely tied to emptiness and non-duality. He illustrated this by saying, "A piece of paper contains the entire universe." At first, this might sound puzzling, but consider it for a moment. The paper exists because of the tree it came from, the sun that nourished that tree, the rain that fell, the lumberjack who cut it, and so on. Each part of the paper's existence is intertwined with countless other elements. Understanding this interconnectedness makes it clear that separating anything into independent categories is an oversimplification of reality. This realization invites a profound shift in how we approach our daily lives. Imagine encountering a difficult situation and feeling immediate frustration. Normally, we might label the situation as bad and ourselves as unlucky or incompetent. However, with the understanding of emptiness, we see that these judgments are not fixed truths but conditioned responses. The situation is simply part of a larger process, an interplay of countless factors and conditions, none of which can be wholly separated. Zen masters use stories not only as teaching tools but as direct gateways to experiencing these principles. One story that exemplifies non-duality is that of two monks watching a flag wave in the wind. The first monk says, "The flag is moving." The second counters, "No, it's the wind that's moving." Their teacher intervenes, saying, "Both of you are wrong. It's your mind that moves." This story points out that categorizing the event, whether wind or flag, is an intellectual exercise. The deeper insight is that the mind's labeling is what creates the perception of movement. To start embodying this understanding in everyday life, practice can be extended beyond the meditation cushion. Try engaging in simple activities, walking, eating, or even speaking, with full awareness and without immediately labeling or evaluating them. This doesn't mean suppressing thoughts but watching them rise and fall like waves, recognizing them as temporary phenomena rather than truths. The path to experiencing emptiness and non-duality is not one of logic but of direct experience. It's a practice of dropping preconceived notions and allowing reality to present itself without the filter of our habitual categorizations. When we live this way, we find a spaciousness that allows us to engage with life's complexities with clarity and compassion. A cornerstone of Buddhist philosophy is the concept of impermanence, known as anicca. This teaching states that all things are transient and subject to change, from the smallest ripple in a pond to the grandest mountain. While this idea might sound simple, it holds profound implications for how we perceive reality and interact with our thoughts and emotions. Understanding impermanence is essential for transcending the mental categories that often box us into rigid ways of thinking and responding. At its core, impermanence challenges the human tendency to cling. We cling to people, achievements, comfort, and, crucially, to our beliefs and ideas. This attachment stems from an innate desire for stability and certainty in an unpredictable world. We create categories like success, failure, happiness, or suffering to make sense of our experiences and to create a sense of order. However, the reality that Buddhism reveals is that these categories are built on shifting sands. Take, for instance, the emotions we experience daily. When joy arises, we might rush to label it as good, wanting to hold on to it for as long as possible. Conversely, when pain or discomfort surfaces, we categorize it as bad, trying to push it away or avoid it. These automatic responses reinforce a cycle of attachment and aversion, which can lead to a narrow, reactive way of living. Yet, if we embrace the truth of impermanence, we start to see that neither joy nor pain is permanent. They are both temporary waves moving through the broader sea of our experience. The Buddha famously taught that suffering arises when we resist the flow of change. The second of the Four Noble Truths points to tanha, or craving, as the root cause of suffering. This craving isn't just about physical desires, it includes the mental clinging to ideas and categories. We crave consistency and often try to mold reality to fit our expectations. When life inevitably shifts away from these constructed categories, we experience dissatisfaction. The teaching of impermanence asks us to acknowledge this craving and let go of our attachments, seeing change not as an enemy, but as a natural part of existence. One of the ways impermanence helps us transcend mental categories is by softening the boundaries we place on experiences. Imagine going through a difficult breakup. The immediate reaction might be to label it as heartbreaking or devastating, and to identify oneself as a victim of loss. While these labels may feel true in the moment, they are part of a fleeting narrative. As days turn into weeks, and weeks into months, the intensity of that experience shifts. What once felt insurmountable becomes a memory, and new experiences emerge. Impermanence shows us that no label fully captures the dynamic, evolving nature of life. Applying this insight involves a shift in mindfulness practice. Instead of attaching labels to each experience, try observing the change itself. For example, when anger arises, recognize it as a temporary state rather than thinking, "I am angry." Shift the mindset to, "Anger is present, and it will pass." This subtle but powerful change in phrasing helps reinforce that emotions are not fixed aspects of your identity, they are like weather patterns moving through your consciousness. A classic Buddhist parable that illustrates impermanence is that of a king who sought advice from a wise sage to handle the unpredictability of life. The sage gave the king a ring inscribed with the words, "This too shall pass." Whenever the king experienced extreme joy or deep sorrow, he would look at the ring and remember that both states were temporary. This simple yet profound reminder helped him maintain equanimity, illustrating that true freedom comes from recognizing the fluid nature of existence. The practice of accepting impermanence has significant implications for transcending mental categories. When we realize that everything changes, it becomes easier to question the validity of rigid labels. The belief that I am a failure or this situation will always be bad begins to lose its power. We start to see that such statements are snapshots of a moment, not definitive truths. Incorporating this understanding into daily life can begin with small, mindful practices. When you're faced with a stressful situation, pause and remind yourself that the discomfort is temporary. Reflect on past challenges and how they evolved over time. This practice not only helps to reduce immediate suffering but also weakens the mind's reliance on fixed categories. Over time, it encourages a broader perspective where thoughts and emotions are seen as part of an ever-changing flow rather than permanent fixtures. Moreover, this insight into impermanence can deepen compassion. When we understand that others' emotions, behaviors, and struggles are also transient, it becomes easier to approach them with patience and empathy. Just as our own pain and joy are impermanent, so too are the states that drive others' actions. This realization can soften judgment and open the heart to a more compassionate way of interacting with the world. In the end, recognizing impermanence is not just about understanding change, it's about embracing it. This acceptance helps dissolve the mental categories that confine us, freeing us to experience life more fully and authentically. As we continue, we'll explore practical exercises to help bring these teachings into daily practice, guiding you further on the path of transcending mental categories and living with greater clarity. Understanding the concept of transcending mental categories is one thing, but putting it into practice is where true transformation begins. To break free from the habitual labeling and categorizing of experiences, we need tangible exercises that align with the teachings of Zen and Buddhism. These practices help shift the mind from automatic judgment to a state of open awareness, encouraging us to see life beyond fixed boundaries. 1. Mindful observation without judgment. Start with a simple exercise, mindful observation. Choose a neutral activity such as sitting in a park, observing nature, or listening to ambient sounds. The key is to watch your thoughts as they arise without labeling them. When you see a bird fly by, resist the urge to think, "That's a bird, and it's beautiful." Instead, notice the movement, the sound, and the colors without assigning meaning or judgment. This practice helps train the mind to observe experiences directly, free from predefined mental categories. Try setting a timer for 5 to 10 minutes each day to engage in this type of observation. As you progress, you'll become more aware of how often your mind rushes to label things, and you'll start catching yourself before these labels take hold. This awareness is the first step in loosening the grip of mental constructs. 2. The noting technique. The noting technique is a mindfulness practice that involves quietly acknowledging what is happening in your mind and body without becoming entangled in it. When thoughts or emotions arise, instead of engaging with them or categorizing them as good or bad, simply note them, thinking, feeling, or sensing. For example, if you catch yourself in a stream of thoughts about work, mentally note thinking and let the thought pass. If you notice tension in your body, simply note tension. This technique acts as a reminder that these experiences are transient and not representative of your entire being. The power of noting lies in its ability to help you step back and observe the flow of thoughts and sensations, breaking the cycle of automatic labeling and attachment. 3. Practicing emptiness through meditation. Zen meditation, or Zazen, is a practice that embodies the concept of emptiness. Sit comfortably in a quiet space, focusing on your breath. As thoughts come and go, observe them without judgment or classification. Instead of categorizing your thoughts, "I'm distracted. This is annoying," let them drift through your mind like clouds across a sky. With time, you will notice that the space between thoughts grows, and the habitual urge to label experiences diminishes. This practice strengthens the understanding that thoughts are not reality, they are fleeting mental events. By observing them without categorization, you train your mind to remain open and receptive. A few minutes each day can lead to profound changes in how you relate to your thoughts and experiences. 4. Embracing impermanence with daily reflections. At the end of each day, spend a few minutes reflecting on moments where you labeled an experience too quickly or clung to a certain mental category. Write down what happened, how you initially categorized it, and how that label impacted your response. Then, remind yourself of impermanence by considering how that moment has changed since it first occurred. For example, if you labeled a work setback as failure, consider what that event looks like now, after some time has passed. Has your perception of it softened or changed? This exercise reinforces the understanding that no category is permanent, and that experiences evolve, encouraging a more flexible approach to future events. 5. Mindful conversations. Engaging in conversations mindfully can be a powerful way to practice transcending mental categories. During a discussion, notice when you start labeling someone's words or opinions, whether as right, wrong, interesting, or irrelevant. Instead of immediately categorizing, practice listening with full attention. When you catch yourself applying a mental label, gently redirect your focus to the speaker's words without judgment. This practice cultivates patience and deeper empathy. It helps you become aware of how quickly the mind categorizes interactions and encourages you to step back and engage with an open, non-judgmental awareness. Over time, this habit reduces reactive communication and fosters a more authentic connection with others. 6. Challenging dualistic thinking. One of the most persistent mental habits is dualistic thinking, where we see things in terms of opposites, good/bad, success/failure, happy/sad. To challenge this, practice finding the middle way in your assessments. For instance, when you think, "I had a bad day," pause and identify moments within the day that were neutral or even positive. This exercise reveals the limitations of absolute categories and helps shift your mindset toward a more nuanced understanding. Start by choosing a daily event that you habitually categorize in black and white terms and explore its subtleties. Was it entirely one thing or another, or did it have shades in between? This approach trains your mind to recognize the fluidity of experiences and to see them without the constraints of duality. 7. Applying koan practice. Koans are an essential part of Zen teaching, designed to push the mind beyond logical categorization. Although traditionally used under the guidance of a teacher, simple koan practice can be adapted for personal reflection. Spend time contemplating a question like, "What was your original face before you were born?" Or "What is the sound of one hand clapping?" Let the question sit in your mind without rushing to find a logical answer. The purpose isn't to solve the riddle but to disrupt habitual thinking and touch the space beyond categories. Approach this practice with patience and curiosity. Over time, the koan's influence will subtly shift your thinking, fostering a deeper awareness of the limitations of mental constructs and opening the mind to non-categorical experiences. The journey of transcending mental categories is transformative, but it's not without its obstacles. As with any practice that requires a fundamental shift in perception, there are inherent challenges that can make progress seem difficult at times. Recognizing these obstacles and understanding how to navigate them is crucial for maintaining momentum and deepening your practice. 1. The habit of automatic labeling. One of the most persistent challenges is the deeply ingrained habit of automatic labeling. Our minds are conditioned to categorize experiences instantaneously, often before we're even conscious of it. This reflex can be so subtle that it feels as though it's happening without our control. Breaking this automatic response requires consistent mindfulness and patience. When you catch yourself assigning a label to an experience, acknowledge it without self-criticism. This acknowledgement itself is progress. It's a sign that you're becoming more aware of your mental processes. 2. Resistance from the ego. The ego thrives on categorization because it gives a sense of identity and control. When you start dismantling these categories, the ego often responds with resistance. This can manifest as discomfort, doubt, or a strong urge to return to familiar thought patterns. You might find yourself thinking, "Why am I doing this?" Or "This isn't working." These thoughts are natural and are part of the ego's way of maintaining its status quo. Recognize this resistance as part of the process and use it as an opportunity to deepen your understanding. Approach it with a sense of compassion for yourself and remember that progress isn't always linear. 3. The discomfort of uncertainty. Transcending mental categories involves embracing a space of uncertainty. For many, This can be disorienting or even frightening, as the mind craves stability and predictability. When you release rigid labels, you step into a more fluid way of experiencing life, which can feel like walking a path without a clear map. To navigate this discomfort, anchor yourself in mindfulness practices that ground you in the present moment. Remind yourself that uncertainty is not synonymous with danger, it's simply the nature of reality as seen through the lens of impermanence. 4. Impatience with progress. Expecting immediate results can be a significant barrier. The process of transcending mental categories is subtle and gradual, often yielding insights that come in small, cumulative moments rather than sudden revelations. It's easy to become impatient or discouraged when progress feels slow. To counter this, focus on consistency rather than results. Even if it seems like nothing is changing, trust that each moment of mindful awareness adds up over time. Reflect periodically on how your responses to experiences have evolved, even in small ways, to remind yourself of the progress you've made. 5. External triggers and judgments in our daily lives. Interactions with others can challenge our practice. Conversations, social media, and even casual observations can trigger old patterns of categorization and judgment. For instance, reading an opinion that contradicts your own might instinctively elicit labels, such as right or wrong. To manage these external triggers, practice pausing before responding. Take a breath, acknowledge the automatic judgment that arises, and choose to engage from a place of openness rather than reaction. Over time, this pause becomes a natural part of your response. 6. Fatigue and mental overload. Attempting to maintain awareness throughout the day can be mentally exhausting, particularly when first starting. The effort to constantly monitor thoughts and challenge labels can lead to burnout if approached too intensely. To avoid this, integrate moments of rest into your practice. Allow yourself periods of simply being, where you let go of deliberate observation and allow your mind to rest. Balance is essential for sustaining this journey over the long term. 7. Misinterpreting non-judgment as indifference. A common misunderstanding is equating non-judgment with indifference. This misinterpretation can lead to confusion or even guilt, as people may fear becoming detached or emotionless. However, transcending categories doesn't mean disengaging from life, it means engaging with a fuller, clearer awareness. It's possible to experience emotions deeply without being confined by the labels that typically accompany them. Recognize that practicing non-judgment allows for more authentic responses, not less caring ones. The key to overcoming these challenges is to maintain a compassionate and patient approach. Remember that the mind's tendency to categorize has been shaped over years, if not decades. It takes time, practice, and self-kindness to loosen these habits. Lean on the support of mindfulness practices, reflective journaling, and community resources such as meditation groups or discussions with like-minded practitioners to keep your motivation strong. As we integrate the practices and teachings of transcending mental categories, we begin to experience life beyond the confines of labels. Living in this space of openness brings a profound shift in how we perceive ourselves and the world around us. The result is a richer, more authentic existence, where interactions, thoughts, and emotions are seen as parts of a flowing whole rather than isolated, defined events. 1. The freedom of non-identification. One of the most liberating aspects of living beyond labels is the freedom from rigid self-identification. When we release ourselves from defining who we are by static categories, such as successful, anxious, or uncreative, we open up to a wider range of possibilities. This doesn't mean that we deny our traits or experiences, rather, we acknowledge them without letting them become our entire story. This shift allows for personal growth, as we are no longer trapped by the limitations of self-imposed labels. Imagine facing a challenging task at work. Instead of thinking, "I am bad at this," you start to see the experience as, "This is difficult right now." This small change in phrasing shifts your perspective from a fixed state of being to an observation of a current, changeable condition. It's a subtle yet powerful reminder that any moment or skill is part of a continuum, not an unchangeable part of your identity. 2. Transforming relationships. Applying non-categorical thinking to interactions with others changes how we connect. When we drop the mental labels we use for people, whether it's friend, adversary, talkative, or reserved, we begin to engage with them in a deeper, more authentic way. We move beyond surface judgments and see individuals as whole, evolving beings. This perspective fosters empathy. For instance, when someone acts in a way that you might usually label as rude or thoughtless, living beyond labels encourages you to pause and consider the complexity of that person's experience. This doesn't mean excusing harmful behavior, but it does mean responding from a place of understanding rather than automatic judgment. Over time, this practice strengthens relationships and builds trust. 3. Embracing present moment awareness. One of the most beautiful effects of living beyond labels is the heightened ability to remain present. Without the mind's constant chatter of categorizing and judging, there's more space to fully experience the present moment. Whether it's savoring a meal, walking in nature, or having a conversation, these experiences become richer and more textured when freed from the constraints of mental constructs. Zen teachings often emphasize that true living happens only in the present. The past is gone, and the future is uncertain, but this moment, untethered by labels, is where life unfolds in its truest form. When you engage with the world in this way, even the simplest actions take on a profound quality. Washing dishes isn't just a chore, it becomes an experience of feeling water and movement. Listening to someone isn't just hearing, it becomes an act of genuine presence and connection. 4. Acceptance and peace. Living beyond labels also brings a deep sense of peace. The stress of needing to fit experiences into boxes or to force situations to align with preconceived notions starts to fade. Acceptance blossoms, not as passive resignation but as an active acknowledgement that life, in all its unpredictability, is perfect as it is. When difficulties arise, this acceptance helps shift the mindset from "this shouldn't be happening" to "this is happening." From this space, solutions and growth can emerge more naturally, as the mind isn't clouded by resistance or over-analysis. Challenges are approached not as enemies but as opportunities for mindful engagement. 5. Continued practice and awareness. Living beyond labels is a practice that continues to evolve. It's not a switch that gets flipped, but a path of ongoing mindfulness and self-reflection. Each day presents new chances to notice where the mind defaults to categorizing and to gently bring it back to awareness. With practice, this becomes more intuitive, leading to an enriched way of engaging with life that is more fluid, connected, and true. As we reach the conclusion of this exploration, remember that the journey toward transcending mental categories is both unique and deeply personal. It's a commitment to seeing life more clearly, interacting more compassionately, and embracing each moment as it comes, unfiltered, raw, and full of potential. As we come to the close of this journey into transcending mental categories, it's clear that this practice is more than just a mental exercise, it's a path toward a more mindful, open, and connected way of living. By questioning the labels we habitually assign to ourselves, others, and our experiences, we free ourselves from the constraints that limit true understanding and joy. Throughout this video, we've explored how mental categories form and why we cling to them. We've learned about the Zen concept of emptiness and the Buddhist teaching of impermanence, both of which invite us to see the world without the rigid filters of our thoughts. These teachings remind us that life is not defined by black and white divisions, but is a continuous, ever-changing flow where experiences cannot be pinned down by simple labels. We discussed practical exercises like mindful observation, the noting technique, and meditation practices that help train the mind to see beyond automatic judgments. Living beyond labels means embracing uncertainty, and cultivating patience as you adjust to this new way of thinking. It's a practice that requires persistence but offers the reward of a richer, more compassionate life. When you live without the constraints of mental categories, you begin to notice the beauty in moments that would otherwise pass by unnoticed. Relationships deepen as you listen without preconceived judgments, and your sense of self becomes more flexible and expansive. You discover that challenges are less daunting when viewed as temporary, evolving parts of your experience rather than as definitive failures or setbacks. Remember, transcending mental categories is a lifelong practice. There will be days when you fall back into old habits, and that's okay. Each moment provides an opportunity to return to awareness, to observe without labeling, and to remind yourself that every thought, emotion, and experience is part of an ongoing process. So, take a deep breath and know that your journey doesn't end here. Continue to practice, reflect, and grow, embracing the fluidity of life with an open heart. Let the teachings of Zen and Buddhism guide you to see the world, and yourself, with a fresh perspective. The next time you catch yourself thinking, "This is who I am" or "This is what this means," pause and ask, is it really so? Or is it just another mental category waiting to be transcended? Thank you for joining this exploration. If you found this journey insightful, consider subscribing to the channel and giving this video a thumbs up. Share your thoughts or experiences in the comments below. We love to hear how you practice transcending mental categories in your own life. Until next time, keep observing, keep learning, and remember, the path to freedom lies beyond the labels.